I can track damage. I can also potentially make pieces out of them. The problem is that I'll need to do more artwork if I'm going to be using the shards for pieces. But doing city health allows me to track how much damage the cities are taking, and airship health, again, I can track damage for that. Really, I could just do one set of tokens to represent damage, but we're still working out the details. So that's not really a problem. We can't proof the things yet because we don't have anything to proof. Now, we're short 3 pieces on the ships. So that's not, on the ships, I mean on the green airplanes. So that's something we'll have to fix. But we also need dice for the game because at its core, even though we're using a board this time, it has to be a dice game for the challenge. The dice in this case represent the attack power and maneuverability of the city, the airships, and the planes. So I'm going to need pretty much one of every type of die except a 20-sided die because of the way that the rules are constructed. And if you wanted to, you could go and take a look at the rules to figure out what exactly that means. Now I'm going to have attackers and defenders, so it's going to be easiest if there's 2 sets of dice so that if, say, a fighter is attacking an airship, they aren't going to have to struggle for the d4. Really, they could just take turns, but it speeds up the game to have 2 sets of dice. Now we're going to go ahead and put together the quadfold board. Go to Boards, Add. This should be becoming fairly familiar to you now. Now, the Steam City Warfare, that's the game that we're building, doesn't have its parts in a folder. So you can see we're having to go a bit further to get things. Well, not really further, but we're having to search harder. It's probably, in the end, about as much effort as going through the file structure of the folders, but that's only because there is a fairly small number of files in this root folder. If we had all of the files spread in the root folder like we do in file set A, it would take a lot more effort to get to these boards. So as you can see, the board has 2 sides. Have to make sure that you get the left side on the left and the right side on the right. So, proof the picture. We look at the image. This is one of the few cases where the picture on the screen is going to actually be considerably smaller than the end product, unless you have a very large screen. You can kind of tell by the trim lines that the half board is even bigger than the box top sticker that you put on before. Viewing the full-size preview, the GameCrafter actually puts the 2 images together and overlaps them. One of the challenges of putting together a quadfold board is you have to make sure that the far right edge of the left side and the far left edge of the right side are laid out in such a way that when they fold on top of each other, you get a smooth line. And that's this area right along the 5 and the S. You may or may not notice that the center square is actually a little bit bigger than the other squares. So it's not a perfect job lining things up, but it's good enough. The 1 looks like a 1, the N looks like an N, the S looks like an S, the 5 looks like a 5, or at least it would if you flipped it the other way around. So we have a board. It's proofed. So that's most of our pieces. We still have to put in our rules. Now, unlike Steam City Defense, Steam City Warfare doesn't have a lot of construction that needs to be done by the end user. So we only need one set of rules. But again, it is a bit buried. You can see that this one has more complicated pictures than Steam City Defense, because it has the board and the strategic warfare elements. It's a little more complicated to learn. Now, our cost is considerably higher than the $19.99 limit that we have. So we're going to have to take a look at what is costing what and make some cuts. So we're looking at the cost of the individual items, figuring out what is costing us what. The shards are $1.74, and we're using only about half of a page. The quadfold board is the single largest cost, but that's necessary to the nature of the game. Our individual pieces are somewhat expensive. All of them are 10 cents or more. But the dice are mostly 75 cents a piece. So we can try and save a couple of dollars by taking the dice out, which means going back to the parts section again. As we said before, the players only really need one of each die. It will slow down the game a little bit and be a little inconvenient, but it won't really hurt the game. And in the end, a lot of these players are probably going to have dice of their own if they feel like they really need to get some more. So that took a chunk out of it, but we're still over budget. So, revisiting the shards, we will delete those and see if we can come up with a more cost-effective means. Also, getting rid of the shards means that we don't have to go through the effort of producing new artwork. Which is good because we didn't have a clear idea of where we wanted to go with the art anyway. Probably would have been bullet holes or something. Probably could have gotten some royalty-free artwork of bullet holes in the side of planes. Could have shrunk it down. But still. Going to look at the details of our individual components, because even without the shards, we aren't where we need to be with cost. The buildings, 16 cents a piece, and not a good way around that. So it would be best if we found some other way to represent the cities. Gonna select the colors that we have for our airplanes again. Got peg ponds. As you can tell, it's not necessarily a quick process to go sorting through all of the parts, even when you have them reduced by the colors. Now, we looked at the possibility of the rocket ships before, didn't really like it for thematic reasons, but we're gonna look at them again, see if we might be able to put them to a use. These rings probably as good as the stackers, except we can't stack them, but who knows what we can do to track the damage on the ships. The gems are fairly inexpensive. The joystick pawns also. These are about the same cost as the stackers are. Poker chips, in a pinch, can actually stack on top of each other, and those are cheaper than the stackers. The size is good. And looking at the description, they are apparently considered good for going on the joystick pawns, which we were also looking at. So, while they're individually a little more expensive than the shards, since we don't have to pay for large collections of them in order to just get a few, we could potentially use the rings to track health using the joysticks. We have to track health on the airships and on the city, so it might be worthwhile to find something else that the rings can stack on. So the rocket ships are 0.48 inches to a side, so they'll fit, but they aren't really much cheaper than the churches. The joysticks are slightly cheaper, same cost as the stackers. Gems, pretty much the same story.